more on the impact of terrorism on businesses, we're joined by Luke Lott. He is an analyst at Global Risk Insights. Luke, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Luke, Air France KLM saying the Paris attacks cost the company $70 million in December. The Bank of France says the attacks cost the French economy around $500 million, mainly from lost revenue in the tourism sector. Luke, is this a knee-jerk reaction, a once-off, or do you see this as a potentially longer-term trend?
Michelle, I think this is pretty short-term. I think this is pretty common, especially after large-scale terrorist attacks like this one. We saw after September 11th, it took the New York Stock Exchange about a month to recover, but most European stock exchanges and indexes recovered by the end of the day or were only a few percentage points down. So I think in the medium to long term, there should be no problem with particular stocks and the indexes coming back up.
All right, let's see how it affects businesses, though we do know that the terrorist attacks in Paris have increased security concerns even more than before. Disney and SeaWorld, a couple of companies that are now deploying extra security measures. They've added metal detectors at parks worldwide. Luke, how much are these increased security measures going to raise costs for these companies?
Oh, well, I think it's yet to be seen. I mean, a lot with Disney and SeaWorld, a lot of this is testing and ahead of the busy holiday season, so it remains to be seen whether this is going to be a permanent fixture at the parks. Then again, if it is, we've seen a lot of cases where in football stadiums, the use of metal detectors has actually reduced costs on personnel, for example, and actually brought down costs. So it could really go either way, and I think a lot of these companies are really experimenting with what works best as far as their bottom line. That said, if it does increase costs for these companies, it is going to be passed on to consumers.
All right, well, you mentioned football stadiums, Luke, and many have said that malls, much like football stadiums, are particularly vulnerable soft targets. And some people are surprised that a store like Macy's, for example, during the rush holiday shopping season had absolutely no increased security measures, at least none that shoppers could see. What other companies do you anticipate adding some additional security measures, if any?
Well, I think again you'll start to see some of these larger companies like Disney, like SeaWorld, Six Flags has already been doing this for a while, starting to play around with how they can increase security while keeping customers and consumers happy and safe. No one wants to scare their consumers away, and they want to keep consumer demand there. So I think as these larger companies start to see how that mix plays out, we'll start to see malls, concert venues, football stadiums, sort of the smaller, medium to smaller size as companies start to implement these sort of security policies as well.
Well, look, you mentioned scaring consumers. Mm-hmm. Now, if, for example, a company like AMC, which operates a chain of movie theaters across the U.S., if AMC started adding metal detectors at theaters, keeping in mind we have had some incidents of gunmen in theaters, how would that be viewed by the public? Would that be seen, do you think, as reassuring or as concerning and a deterrent?
I think at first it would definitely cause a dip in consumer demand, but I think as consumers get used to the idea, and of course we've seen this implemented throughout airports, throughout lots of other venues, consumers become used to the idea, and actually there are lots of reports that say that actually the use of metal detectors doesn't provide a whole lot of added security. In fact, it's the sort of hidden personnel that these companies bring on that you don't know are there that are actually providing the security. So these sorts of mechanisms are really there to give consumers that sort of confidence. So I think in the end, it does provide a sort of a boost.
Well, if we are going to be seeing this increased demand in security, which companies are standing to benefit most from this?
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of the private security contractors. We have Allied Barton in the U.S., Securitas that provides a lot of similar services in Europe, who are really where a lot of the large costs are coming from. These are all the people who are providing the personnel and the background security that you're not seeing when you go to places like Disneyland. And so while metal detectors have a small upfront cost, I think a lot of the larger costs are coming from these hidden personnel that you're not seeing.
Let's touch very quickly, Luke, on terrorism insurance. That seems to be a booming business. According to the Insurance Information Institute, 62% now of businesses in the U.S. have some form of terrorism insurance. Very quickly, how does this work?
Sure. So Congress just renewed the TRIA, which is the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, for another 7 years. So yeah, this is a very healthy market. Will continue to be there. Basically, before 9/11, terrorist insurance was included within a company's basic insurance plan, and after the attacks, it's a special sort of clause now that companies are forced to pay for because of the costs associated with it. And so now the government is acting as sort of an insurer of last resort, and companies are forced to pay this extra fee in addition to their regular insurance costs. But
Okay.
you're correct. It's about after the Boston attacks, for example, around 80% of businesses, small to medium businesses even, were buying terrorism insurance, whereas before it was only 50%.
All right. Thank you so much, Luke Lott, analyst at Global Risk Insight.